Welcome to On the Move. On February 6 and after, many earthquakes in 11 cities in Turkey have affected millions of people, even beyond the nation state. Official records note that at least 45,000 people have lost their lives. This does not seem to include people who were not identified, which could be up to 5,000 people, according to forensic medicine experts, and many people remain missing. The loss of lives is beyond our understanding, obviously. But on the other hand, whole cities and neighborhoods are destroyed, leaving millions of survivors homeless. Currently, around 2 million people left the affected cities. This is just the number of people who registered in their arrival locations. But considering the massive impact of the earthquakes, millions of people have lost their homes, and the people who could not afford to leave remained in their cities and villages. The tents and containers in the affected area are extremely limited, leaving thousands on their own. There are no durable solutions for alternative housing throughout the nation state. Right to adequate housing for everyone, and even for people living in the earthquake areas, remain a question. While mourning for everything we lost will probably never be over, the problems and human rights concerns we face are now entering a new phase. How Turkey will protect everyone who survived but displaced without discrimination will be very crucial to the country's human rights record. Turkey have experienced internally displaced people in the past due to conflicts, but not at the scale. So it is relatively a new concern in human rights debates for us. Therefore, today I would like to draw on the international legal and humanitarian framework for us to better understand the obligations to protect internally displaced persons. I'm honored to have Ms. Paula Gaviria as my guest today. Paula is a human rights lawyer and a forced displacement expert, and she was appointed special rapporteur on the human rights of internally displaced persons by the Human Rights Council in September 2022 and assumed the mandate on November 2022. Welcome, Paula, and thank you so much for having the time to be with us.
Thank you, Begum, for having me. It's an honor.
We can just start with your general comments, if you like, on the earthquake and on Turkey, on issues of internally displaced persons. But in general, I would like to discuss with you, of course, mainly the national obligations to ensure their protection.
Yes, thank you. You already spoke about the numbers. This is figures that we, as you say, we cannot even imagine, and these are the ones that we know, the ones that have been registered, as you said. So it's not only about the loss of lives and the survivors of those who have died, all this suffering. There's so much suffering and mourning that the Turkish are going to have for some years, because this mourning and grief takes time to heal. So all the solidarity from my part, and I know that from around the world. And I like that you are starting to take awareness of this other tragedy, other than the loss of lives and the impact on families and communities, which is the people that have to be displaced from their communities, from their families as well. So there's a lot of people moving, and I think what you said about solutions, obviously it's going to take time. So I think that it has to be done well. I like the approach that you have about the responsibility of the authorities, obviously the national authorities as the first duty bearers in this respect, but also international community. These are the moments that we have to work better together. This is where humanity and the humanitarian system and the human rights system is at stake. It's where we prove that we can be better and that we can work together. It's a time to do it right. If we do it right now, it's going to be better in the future, because it's going to take time. It's going to take time, but we don't want this displaced people to be protracted in this situation, to be living in needs and in humanitarian and in vulnerabilities. So
Yeah.
there's ways to do it. But I think the key is obviously to know the obligations, people also to know their rights, a strong support to local NGOs, to local civil society that are the first that are there, have been there already, but now they are doing the best they can with what they have. They have also lost friends and relatives. So I think it's this solidarity, this nation working together towards a better future for all the ones that are suffering. And there's things to do. We can talk about it in a minute. And there's also the situation of uh, of Turkey being one of the countries in the world, or the one that is hosting the largest refugee population. So there's also the refugees that were affected by this crisis and that also have additional vulnerabilities that we cannot leave behind. We should examine that. And finally, you also talked about the whole of the problem. Obviously, everyone involved, the cities that were impacted by the different earthquakes, but there's also the situation in your neighbor country in the northwest Syria, for example. So there's this people affected by conflict in the northwest Syria that also were affected by the earthquakes, and that's another issue that should be addressed and taken into account. So yeah, we can start the conversation around what we should do and what you should do as a nation, and mainly the authorities with the first responsibility.
Yeah. From the guidelines on IDPs, I see that the national authorities are the sole, authority, or have the main responsibility to ensure the protection of IDPs. But we can separate these in a sense, in my opinion, or at least in what I see at the moment, what's happening on the ground, in the immediate aftermath of the disasters and in the long run. So what are the obligations of the nation states that people have the right to hold the authorities accountable and claim their rights?
Okay, so there's at least four obligations, main ones. First, the authorities must safeguard the internally displaced person's right to freedom of movement and choice of residence. And that includes the right to seek safety in other parts of the country and abroad, if necessary, and protection from forcibly returning to disaster affected areas. That's really something that should be taken with a lot of care. There's this tendency to think that returns are possible when they are not yet possible. So that's another right that the internally displaced people have. Second, the authorities have to work with the people that have been displaced to try to reunite with their families, and or at least learn what was the fate of the missing relatives. So authorities should try to conduct family tracing and reunification. Obviously, there's a lot of coordinated work that should be done here with international organizations that work and have expertise on these issues, and also ensure that family members who wish to remain together are allowed to do so in the emergency shelters or the temporary housings. There's also the right to maintain or to have an adequate standard of living. Authorities must ensure that these people have access to essential food, potable water, basic shelter, housing, appropriate clothing, and all the essential medical services and sanitation and medical care for the wounded or the sick. These are the main obligations immediate and aftermath of these disasters.
Yeah.
And if you want, in the long term,
Yeah.
should I go with the long term?
Before
So the
you
long
go on
term,
the long Before you go on the long term, I want to comment a little bit because unfortunately, what we see today is not, yes, of course, the missing persons is a very serious issue at the moment. But on the other hand, the problem that we are facing is also because of the inadequacy of shelters. It's not also the people are at risk of separating, but also a lot of families are forced to live, let's say, under one tent. So the crowded living situations, access to sanitation, hygiene. We see a lot of reports on, let's say, access to clean water to drink is very limited in some of the cities. Some people report they haven't been able to take a shower for since the earthquake. Some people, especially immediately after the earthquake, there were no toilets. Still in many places there are no toilets. So in that sense, I think the healthy environment is unfortunately, especially for those who had to remain in these tent and container spaces, is very challenging at the moment in these areas.
yeah, I understand, and there's a high risk of infections, of sanitary crisis, as we're seeing that the cholera in Syria, for example. So this is very important. This is I know reunification and being together is key, but there's other ways to do it, as maybe it can be thought of. But I think that's the basic needs. I mean, the basic needs should be covered by the states, and this cannot happen. This is something that should be obviously addressed by the local authorities. But I think international aid, international NGOs are here to support in that effort, and all the channels for this support to arrive should be opened and received. I think this is the moment what we were saying, that all aid, all support should be received. Obviously, the first is coordinated, planned. So we don't create more harm than the one that has already been created. And I missed another aspect that I think it's very important, other than the ones that you were mentioning, which are the life saving. It's the psychosocial support. I think that's also something that has to be thought of since the beginning. The trauma. There's a lot of trauma here. Obviously, trauma from the impact of what happened, the people that lost relatives or that lost everything. But there's also the trauma of the aftermath of learning to live in a way that they were not used to live. So that support should be also there and seen as a basic need, I would say, added to the ones that we were mentioning.
No, you're absolutely right. And the access to mental health care, unfortunately, remains also very limited. And it's also a nationwide trauma to a certain extent. So there is a lot to be dealt with in that sense. But and sadly, probably we'll see its consequences in the very long run if it's not dealt with as you advise. In terms of the long term, for establishing durable solutions, what are the priorities that needs to be considered?
One is what we were mentioning. I think that the vision of durable solutions should be set since the beginning of a tragedy. We don't have to wait for solutions to come after 1 or 2 years. So early solutions is also an important concept to address since the beginning. That is why the registration, the characterization, the profiling of who's who, where's the family, where are the missing, because we need to get this right in the medium and long term. So solutions have to come since the planning in the beginning, since the psychosocial support in the beginning, since what are the expectations of the people that are displaced in a shelter? How do they want to rebuild their lives? So this has to be addressed since the beginning. That's the first. And as we know, durable solutions include a sustainable reintegration or return to the place of origin, a sustainable local integration in areas where people were displaced, and the places where they have fled, or sustainable reintegration in another part of the country. And as you have stressed, national authorities have the primary role to ensure this durable solution. So the needs, the rights, and the legitimate interests of internally displaced must be the primary consideration. So this, starting since the beginning, doing surveys, profiling, knowing what people want to do after the immediate crisis has happened is mostly important. Knowing and having their opinions taken into account, since that first part is what makes that solution at the end be sustainable, because it was something that they were informed about, that they voluntarily chose to do, and to participate in the planning of what's going to happen with them. It's key for that to be an important part of the future. So authorities must create an environment in which these rights are respected, and they assure that this is going to happen this way. So they laid the ground in a way for that solution to be ensured, and some of those ground that should be set. Obviously, it's safety and security. Obviously, is everything regarding in this type of crisis is the strengthening or establishment of disaster risk reduction measures. We are seeing that there's not one earthquake, that's several earthquakes. So this is going, I don't know if it's going to keep on happening, but it hasn't been one crisis, it's been one over the other. So that is very important. This early warning, this preparedness, this mitigation, adaptation is key in this type of situations. Obviously, to start setting the adequate standard of living. So this access to minimum goods and services, including the food, the water, the shelter, the essential services that we were talking about, and at least primary school education, because we always leave education as something for the future in a way, and this should be established very early in the process, and start with this profiling after knowing the people's capacities, because these are not only people with needs, these are people with capacities, these are people that still have dreams. Having lost your house, your everything, doesn't mean that you've lost your will and your dream of doing things, of being successful. So it's very important to the psychosocial, I would say, since the beginning, for laying the ground for solutions. And obviously there's the land and property restitution. This is an issue about people losing their land and property. So the setting of applicable rules to reestablish and to have this the house and the property restored is key. And here I would just say that special attention should be paid to the right of women and children, because they most of the time are not, or were not, the owners, because there's all these discussions and legacy of lack of rights for women in this access to land. So this should be also addressed in order for them to have the right of housing. And the authorities would have a legal obligation to do that in the situations where the destruction was due to the lack of maybe the necessary and reasonable disaster risk reduction measures. So that's something else that we have to see, where the measures to mitigate this type of disaster set up correctly. This is something that we would know in the near future, and that's important. And one last thing, which is one of the first things that people lose, it's documentation. Not everyone has their documentation with them, and they lose it. So also the access to personal and other documentation should be assured, and this obviously leads to other rights that internal displaced people have, and that are key for them to have this durable solutions to their vulnerability.
Yeah. I mean, what we see in Turkey at the moment is, like, as I said, the 2 million people are spread around. As we always know in the literature, that when people are either as refugees or as internally displaced persons, they want to usually stay as close as possible if that's possible. They don't want to go. Usually the general trends is not going too far if they can survive within either neighboring countries or neighboring cities. In that framework, but what we see, for example, already in some of the neighboring cities, the local communities are already responding, okay, we had enough, go back, or, you should, we don't have any more place in this city type of reactions we see. Or although the national authorities have the, primary role to support, we do not really see, especially when it comes to refugees and migrants, any guarantees of housing, for example. So people who have left are usually the people who can afford or have other family members whom they can stay with in different cities. So in that sense, I think the right to adequate housing, like how does the authorities are required to support when people are spread around all the country, and also we have an unknown period of people living in tent cities, the ones who are, how long can they stay in tent cities? What is the, legitimate, proportionate and measures to understand these terms? Because they can stay forever until the buildings are built. But,
Yes, and I think that the first thing that you mentioned is a symptom everywhere in the world. The first reaction of local communities that receive all this pressure of people coming, and this idea of the refugees or the IDPs taking their jobs, or that's something that always happens at the beginning, and I think the work there with the media, the academia, the local NGOs, civil society is key. Like this, build a sense of, as you were saying at the beginning, the nationwide there's a trauma, and there should be this sense of solidarity should arise, but we have to help it happen. I think with this other, like I think local NGOs are key, and civil society are key to try to move this around. This is a whole of society situation. This is not the internal displaced persons and the authorities. This involves the host communities. This involves everyone in the nation, as you were saying. So if they didn't lose their home, someone that is also Turkish lost it, and that's a national situation, a national mourning, and a national excuse, in a way, maybe to wake up, because we sometimes don't have this empathy and this we don't see the others. We don't put in anyone in others' shoes. So this is the time to do it. So that's the first thing, to make this a solidarity momentum with the other actors that can help, the religious actors. I mean, everyone that works with the community and the society, and the data. I think the data is key in this moment. To try to have the best information possible around, obviously, as you were saying, the desire, the will, what do people want to do, and what they want to do, as you were saying, is to go back to where they knew how to live, and where they had all the relations, and that might take time. So there's this temporary and transitional, in a way, decision that that states and local authorities that are the ones that are there to provide and to be responsible have to take care of. So and who knows? I mean, this happens after some years of being there. People might want to stay there. But just knowing, tracking very well what was the property, how and I think that one right that we don't talk about, which is key, is the right to be informed. So if people know more or less, this is going to take 5 years, this is going to be like this, you know, this is not easy, we're struggling, there's a lot of people that need support, that have rights, so we're going to prioritize, we're going to start with this, then with this, you know, it's about planning. It's about planning, informing people, obviously after taking their voice as the first voice in any decision, planning with them. You know, if you plan with them and you tell them, these are the 3 possibilities, you know, these are the 3 possibilities for us to rebuild your house, or how do we do it? And knowing that this is not easy, it's going to take time, but we can make it together. So I think that right, the right to be informed, you know, is key. And people are adults, they are citizens. They have lost their houses, but they are still citizens, and they know what they want, and they are people that can decide, you know, and can see what's better for them, and obviously take decisions. And if they have their basic needs and transitional like possibilities for them to reestablish their livelihoods and to feel they are part of a society, I think that they can wait if those rights are addressed properly and the other ones are planned in a decent time, medium term possibility. I think that's possible. It's easy to say, obviously, this is something that it's easy to talk about, but I know, and I've been there. I've been part of the authorities in my country, and this is hard. I mean, this is really going to challenge, and it's challenging already the authorities, because they have to take decisions that are hard, and they have to be fast in doing that. And that political will has to be there, has to be sustained over time for the next maybe 10 years, I don't know, for everything to be put back in place, if I may, because things are never going to be the same, but the better for everyone.
Exactly right on that point. Actually, what is challenging in Turkey at the moment is, you know, to address some of the issues you've raised, like access to information. 2 days after the earthquake, authorities decreased the bandwidth for Twitter for people to actually, call for help to ensure search and rescue efforts. Soon after, several media organizations were charged and fined, and one of them was forced to close for 3 days. So in a country where we discuss already existing serious human rights violations in terms of freedom of media, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, you know, where all these issues are already challenged in very, you know, that amounts to very serious human rights violations, ensuring these guarantees becomes a very, so one of the reasons it's not interesting for me to have this discussion with you, because we have these really, kind of contrasting mechanisms where there is the human rights international law standards. On the other hand, we are faced with already existing a human rights framework that has been highly violated, and amidst a severe economic crisis and an upcoming election in 3 months. So the government, for example, at the moment argues that they can rebuild the cities in 1 year, but the civil society, who's been, regularly silenced in Turkey society, is arguing, like Chamber of Architects, Chamber of Urban Planners are saying, you cannot rebuild. You can build concrete buildings, but you cannot rebuild a city in a year, because city is a living organism, and as you said, the people who were living there needs to be part of that remake to recreate their. So my question is, like, when we are, I'm sure you are very experienced in working under economically or politically insecure environments when it comes to IDPs. What are the things that we need to watch out for, or how can we inform the solidarity and mobilization to ensure these rights are protected?
I think the first, as you were saying, is I think, I don't know if it was at the beginning, but people know that they have rights. Obviously, this is about the humanitarian aid that they have to receive, but it's more than that. It's human rights, and they have to insist on that. So this is going to be a moment for society to be more aware of their rights. This is maybe an opportunity for this to happen. Crises are always a possibility to learn things, and I think that this has to be a moment for the civic space to be strengthened, for solidarity and coordination between civil society, because there's always tensions as well. So this is a time to listen to this basis of society, which is the civil society. So and all their expertise, as you were saying, the architects, the people that know how things are done, and what the time that things take to be done, because in the authorities always commit this. I would call it a mistake, so I don't give other names, of just promising things to be solved in the very short term. Yeah. And that's not true. I mean, that's not true. So it's going to take time for things to be as the way they were. Maybe, as I said, they cannot be that way ever, but they can be good, and they could even be better for many. It could be better for economy as well. People moving, and people putting all their knowledge in a new place that they decide to live could be an opportunity for them and for the host community. So that's another way to see it, which is the way that I like to see it, because it's a way to plan and to dream about a better future together. But this, as I say, the basis of this is information, transparency. Transparency is so important when when it's about this type of situations where people are suffering, people are afraid of the future. They are traumatized. We have to accept this, and trauma sometimes makes you immobilizes you. You sometimes feel that you don't have any alternative. So everyone has to work with everyone in supporting and in informing and in being very transparent around the rights, around the time it's going to take, and yeah, this is a moment to strengthen the rights. People have to know they have rights, and that they have rights not only in the immediate moment of the tragedies, because we tend to forget. There's, after these tragedies, there's months of attention and the international community, and everyone is aware, but after a year or so, people forget. So what is the plan? This is a 10-year plan. How are we going to do it? And we're going to monitor it, and this is something that the next government has to have as a priority in their agenda, and a plan that the community, the internal displaced, the civil society can can ask for its accomplishment. They have to be accountable. Also, the authorities, you know. So yeah, it's complex. It's complex, but I think it's not impossible. I think
no, it's definitely not impossible.
that you have the capacities. You've shown the capacities to do it. I mean, all the examples with the refugees and with other communities. I mean, I think you have it in your blood, you know. And obviously, there's so many difficult moments and struggles that you've gone through, and the closing of the civic space that you were telling me, and the different human rights violations that combine with everything. But no, it's a time to be there for you as well as international community. I think that's also the other actor here that we should not forget about.
I'll come to that, but before that, what I understand from your comments is that there are a few things that, as civil society, what you actually highlight is the national authorities have the obligation, in a sense, to provide the basic needs. That's what I understand, has the obligation to provide the basic needs and the rights. But then one of its primary roles, it seems that it must strengthen and protect the civil society that's protecting the people, in a sense. So because from what you're saying, for me, civil society, non-governmental organizations, besides the international organizations, seems, you seem to underline their significance. Another thing that comes out is that I should take note of this. This is one of the things we, I guess, as the civil society need to do, is to write down and distribute. You are an internally displaced person, and A, B, C, D, E, these are your rights. These are the things you can claim from the authorities. These are the things that you actually are entitled to have in this country. So I think as civil society, one of our tasks then is to actually ensure people know what their rights are, because this is not something that when you are in your own country, you don't feel like a refugee, right? You don't feel like a migrant, because you feel you are still in the same nation state. You belong to the same authorities. But on the other hand, actually they have particular vulnerabilities that addresses certain rights. This is what I understand from your comments.
Yes, definitely. And as I was saying, civil society and the civil society that work on human rights, liberties, and the right, the ones you were sharing with me, the right to assembly, freedom of expression. These are key. This is a key moment to strengthen them, to protect them, to support them in many ways, because maybe they are not delivering the humanitarian aid themselves, but they are delivering another type of aid, which is the awareness, which is the surrounding, which is the building of the social fabric, the sense of a nation that in a way has to be rebuilt, So what's the nation we want to build, to live in after crisis like this, Do we want to what are the changes that we need, So and being there not only in the first moment of the tragedy, but continuously to be able to assure that the decisions that are taken around the internally displaced persons are consulted to them, with them, that all the accountability and the transparency that needs to happen after this occurs. And obviously the humanitarian NGOs, the civil society, the local civil society that's providing this humanitarian aid. The authorities are obliged to grant and to facilitate free passage of this humanitarian assistance, access to the internal displaced people under international human rights laws, humanitarian law, and can never be arbitrarily withheld that assistance, and particularly if not able to willing to provide it themselves. So that is crucial, and as you know, the international community is looking over that as a key aspect of the awareness that we need to raise. And as you said at the beginning, this humanitarian assistance is to be carried out in accordance with the principles of humanity and impartiality, non-discrimination. You mentioned this at the introduction, and cannot be diverted, particularly for political reasons, regardless of the justification. This is really key, and mainly if you're talking about elections coming soon, this is key. And obviously these people should be protected. These humanitarians, local humanitarians, are one of the most important civil society organizations right now. So they have to be protected from attacks, from violence, from discrimination. Yeah, I would just like to stress that, because it's and as I said at the beginning, I think they have also suffered. I mean, everyone has suffered in this situation. So there's the other support for the ones that are supporting, which is important. No, so psychosocial aid for these people that are aiding, that are helping, because they've seen so many things. They feel hopeless sometimes because they couldn't save someone. Because it's so much that's happening, and that they're saying that they are suffering, and they could also be traumatized. So this is like a network of support in a way that should be put in place, and definitely protecting and supporting very much these local NGOs. Not only, as I said, not only humanitarians, which are key, as I've said, but all human rights NGOs. I mean, the media, you were saying, the local or NGOs, everyone.
Speaking of participation, since we're coming at the elections, what are the risks that you have seen so far that we need to keep an eye for? When we are, Turkey is a big population, obviously, but this is, the earthquake affected a major portion of the population, and, people, the identification, especially for, because in Turkey, most of the identification is done with fingerprints. I think this has been relatively, access to identity cards and stuff for survivors has been relatively, easy path, I guess. But I'm wondering when we are in these situations, like in the immediate aftermath of earthquake, with IDPs, if we have an election, what are the things we need to keep an eye for?
Yeah, I would say like at least three. One is the residence requirements for place of voting, which is always a challenge. So electoral participation is often tied to one's residence and registered residence, and this is going to be a challenge with this mobility. This IDPs moving from city to city. This voting in the place of origin might not be a possibility now. So it might be very difficult for the internally displaced to reestablish their residence somewhere else, as well, as we were saying, for voting purposes following the displacement. So authorities should endeavor to adopt special measures. I mean, that has to be like a very particular response, a differentiated response in this case, that streamlines the process for the internally displaced to register, to vote, and to stand as candidates, because that's the other thing. It's not only about voting, it's also about being eligible, being candidates for any, that's also important. As we were stressing, they are citizens. And after crises like this, many of them want to contribute better from other places to their communities, maybe being elected. So that's the one thing. The other, the lack of documentation, as we were saying at the beginning, civil documentation it's almost always lost or destroyed following this displacement, and is necessary for the voters to be able to register and cast their votes for potential candidates to prove their identity and residence. So it may be challenging for people to obtain or renew documentation, particularly when it's normally done in place of origin. Proof of residency may also be challenging to obtain those documents. So, and certain groups have, before crisis, have also been discriminated sometimes to achieve this documentation. So it's important for authorities to adapt, again, to adapt flexible solutions with regard to the reissuance of the documentation or the documents required for electoral participations as voters and candidates. And the last challenges and risks are related to, obviously, to security, to the conditions that authorities have to create, to make for the participation to be possible. No, it's not only security conditions, it's also health conditions, it's also I don't know, maybe supporting in other ways the how do you say that, the transport from one place to the other. I don't know, but this is definitely going to be one of the highest challenges that you are going to face, since elections are so soon. Because if the registration process at the beginning of the crisis was not done completely or adequately, and there's a sub-registry, you were at the beginning, you were saying maybe these are not all the numbers that we have, then it's going to take more time to get this right.
Sure. Anything else you want to add, since our time is coming to an end?
I would just add what we didn't mention too much about the international community. Mm-hmm. And I said, I mean, we stressed throughout the interview about the primary responsibility that the national authorities have for protection and assistance of the internally displaced persons. But the international community can and should assist through the provision of humanitarian assistance and eventually development assistance to enable durable solutions. So I think this is the time for the international community to get it right. I've seen different very important efforts from the interagency standing committee to coordinate better, you know, to flash appeals for more support from donors, and yeah, to do it in a maybe with more impact, with earlier response, and obviously an assistance that can be sustained over time. And the keyword here is an assistance that is complementary to the national authorities and local NGOs assistance. So so the needs of the internally displaced persons are addressed, and the planning that I stress again, the planning, the response for the planning is done, and it's accordingly to the expectations and the expectations of the people, you know. So so humanitarians have to be there and have to stay there for a while, complementing the national authorities' response. I just wanted to stress that.
Yeah, no, the international community's responsibility, especially international humanitarian organizations, has been, you know, especially working in Europe. This is also this, I think it's not just the international humanitarian aid organizations, but the responsibilities of the EU, responsibilities of other international bodies is also crucial in terms of ensuring this protection is ensured, you know, because, you know, we see one crisis and after another, and it's not just the aid organizations or, you know, UN supporting these things already come in the general plans and programs.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, in my opinion, also we are, facing a challenge that there is so many human rights violations, especially around EU's borderlands, with refugees and migrants. And, Turkey being on that borderland, hosting many, refugees and asylum seekers. In the immediacy of the earthquake, the European public was talking about, we can't have any more refugees. But, I was like, hold on, people are, dying, many of them are dead. And at this point, I think we need to ensure how we can provide protection where they are before, if you do not actually ensure, as you said, a sustained protection, then there are, especially, refugees and asylum seekers, they will have to seek alternative solutions. Yes. But I think the key is here, what you exactly say, ensured sustainable and transparent solutions.
Yeah, it's key. It's key to know that this is going to take time and that we need to plan with that vision. But not having said this, it doesn't mean that that the things can be right since the beginning. So it has to be long term, but not protracted response. So well, you are going to wait for this response in 10 years. No. So this is a complex situation where the complementarity, the coordination efforts, the planning together with the voice of the IDPs at the center, with the community holding and the NGOs and civil society and the civic space being strengthened in order for this to be possible, to be responsibly made, and to be at the end successfully for everyone. I think that this could strengthen the nation as a nation, if it's done right. This could build up a new identity of a nation, a more solidarity, a nation that's more solidaire. How do you say that? To its people. Maybe there's surveys and there's numbers that show that there's positive impact when these things are done right in the economy. So yeah, I think that there's ways to do it since the beginning that assure the rights and the human rights of all people, and the IDPs and the internally displaced persons and the refugees that are already in the country are addressed. And I really hope that this is the way that is going to be done. We have to be watching, we have to be surrounding and raising awareness when this is not happening the way it should be. But I wish the Turkish people and the people that are actually in strong needs and that feel that there is no future, I just want to say there is future, and better things are going to come for all of you, and we are going to be there to support you always. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me, and I appreciate you being here, giving your time to us. Thank you very much again. I hope you keep an eye on the IDPs in Turkey. We would appreciate a continued conversation in the years to come, hopefully.
Thank you, Begum, and I count with your support and acknowledge, obviously, the work that you're doing. It's very important for the media to be there. You're the watchdogs, and you can raise so much awareness now. So thank you so much for your work.
Thank you.